The first policy up is Draft Policy 2015-2. I'll have Kristen Tassett come up from the AC to give the presentation.
Thank you very much. So the problem statement was articulated about a year ago now, and basically had to do with the fact that organizations that obtain a needs-based supply of IP addresses via the transfer market may have an unexpected change in their business plan and may need to use those addresses in another region. Now, the problem isn't caused so much by ARIN per se, because ARIN policy doesn't restrict the use of ARIN-sourced IP addresses globally, but there are other registries that require a movement of numbering resources to their regions and specifically countries within their regions in order to legitimately be able to use those IP addresses in their regions. So this is the current text of the fourth bullet of section 8.4 of the NERPM, and it is the only bullet within that section that would be affected by this proposed policy. So the initial proposal was simply to remove the word transfer so that there would no longer be any constraint on the movement of resources within the first 12 months in the case of a transfer. However, so it would facilitate this use that I just discussed, so that the resources wouldn't be locked in the ARIN whois for 12 months. So under the current policy, as I said, an organization is prohibited from moving some or all of those addresses to another region's whois if there is a need to remove them, and that need doesn't relate to ARIN policy but the other RIR's policies or national policies in some cases. So because other types of transfers coming in to what is an entity that may be global in scope is approved on a 24-month supply, there's often a situation where the business needs of the organization can change in the first year. So there was a lot of discussion about removing that word transfer from that bullet early on PPML. One view was, this isn't ARIN's problem, resources can be requested from another region instead. The other view was that ARIN members operating global networks prefer to deal with one RIR as much as possible, and this policy would reduce incentives to use other means to essentially bypass the anti-flip provision, as it's called, that constitutes that fourth bullet of section 8.4. So initially what we tried to do is to propose a requirement of some sort of corporate affiliation between the source and the recipient entities to make it more likely that eliminating the 12-month anti-flip period in that situation will meet the needs of the multi-region network operators without encouraging abuse. Following input received at the NANOG 66 PPC and on PPML, the proposed, the fourth bullet of section 8.4 was changed in the manner that was being considered. And that modification would have added two new definitions to the NERPM. Those would be affiliated and control. I don't want to dwell on this because in the end we didn't go this way as the shepherds of the policy. So a staff and legal analysis was received regarding the proposal that indicated that it could be implemented as written, but there were some qualifications. First of all, The definition of control wouldn't be applied to Section 8.2 transfer cases because that would conflict with staff responsibility to ensure fully researched and vetted chains of authority for M&A situations. And General Counsel expressed concerns with the proposed definitions of affiliated and control. Although they were based on statutory provisions, the reality is that if you get into that level of definition, whatever you choose has to work across multiple jurisdictions that constitute the ARIN region. So for that reason, caution was urged, essentially, and alternative formulations of these definitions were proposed. The General Counsel also reminded us that the reason for this problem isn't ARIN policy per se, but the requirements of other RIRs, as I said at the beginning. So we did amend the problem statement to point that out. So following these developments, we thought about what to do, and instead of trying to continue tinkering with those definitions, and also based on the recollection of one comment received at NANOG from one participant that said they would have wanted a simpler formulation for this, we decided to test out dumping the definitions altogether and just using words that certainly have legal meaning but don't require a lot of extra explanation within the NERPM itself. So you'll see that the red text there is the latest text that's been introduced into this bullet. So basically, there is an affiliation agreement that is still maintained, and this reflects the community views that were expressed generally, that this is a good way to proceed, but without the extra complication of definitions. And we made that other clarification that we discussed, that the requirement for this results from other RIR constraints. We haven't really had much feedback. Yeah?
Are you raising a point in the middle, or?
Sorry?
Yes.
Sorry.
There's a question that seemed to be
Yeah.
pressing. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to, Jason Schiller, Google, ASOAC. I just wanted to clarify what you just said to make sure it's clear to everyone in the room. As printed in the discussion guide, the draft policy 2015-2 says it includes adding a new section 217 as a definition of affiliated and 218 as a definition of control. Those are no longer officially part of the proposed text.
No, that
So
was,
the discussion guide as printed is incorrect.
that's right. 'Cause-
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
this change was much more recent, but thank you for pointing that out. It's a much more recent change. It came after the printing deadline. So there hasn't been much feedback on PPML other than a question directed at staff regarding how often the situation's encountered, and staff had committed to investigate and report back. I don't know if we have that answer yet or not, but that's something maybe you can talk about later. And just this morning, hot off the press, we received a revised staff and legal analysis. The staff analysis is very clean. It basically says the proposal can be implemented as drafted. General Counsel indicated that prior concerns have been satisfied, and implementation could go ahead if this is implemented with minimal resource impact and would occur 3 months after ratification by the ARIN board. So the questions we as the Shepherds have for you this afternoon are: one, does this revised text, the latest text that you just saw, strike the appropriate balance between the needs of global multi-network operators and fraud mitigation? Is the proposed text sufficiently clear, and do you have any other concerns? And before engaging in that discussion, I wanted to thank Kathy Aronson, who's actually the primary shepherd on this, for giving me some room to maneuver. I wanted to try my hand at going ahead with this one just to get some more practice in, since I'm a relatively new AC member, but I did rely on her counsel heavily in the process, so I wanted to give her some recognition for that. and also for the quick turnaround by staff on the second, staff and legal analysis.
Thank you, Chris. So we'll open the microphones. Before we go to the microphones, though, I just thought it would be useful just to take a second, since this is our first policy, just to state it's important that anybody who has a comment, who would like to speak about the proposal, the merits or not, you should approach a mic. We also have the remote participation, and they'll be able to participate. And that it's very important that if you have something, even if it's just to say, I support this proposal because it would help my business, or I have a problem because it will hurt, or just either I support or not, it's extremely valuable input to the AC, because they, after this, what will happen after this meeting, they will meet on Wednesday and they will have to make a decision on what to do with this policy. So I just thought it would be useful to take a quick second and remind that. And with that, I would love to have people approach the microphones, and we will start with the front microphone. And of course, remind you to say your name and affiliation, if any, before speaking.
Hi, I'm Kathy Arnson. Since it's not in the discussion guide, can we put it back to the meaty bit of the text so that people have a chance to look at it while they're raising their issues or whatever? Thanks.
Thank you. Vint has a point. Go ahead, Vint.
This is a question for counsel. So can I ask, is counsel in the room? Yes, I see
is, and he's
trying
approaching
to.
a microphone.
I see him trying to escape now. Specifically, the red-colored text reads, unless either the source and recipient entities own or control each other. I have questions about how to interpret that, because legal structures usually don't involve companies owning each other. There's usually one or the other controls the other one. So I'm not sure that this language makes sense. So counsel, could you respond, please?
Counsel, rear microphone.
So, Vint, I didn't draft the language, but I think there's two different intents in the language. One is for the wholly owned subsidiary, where a holding company owns long strings of subsidiaries. And then the control issue would be where you don't own it outright, but you have control through the shares or some other mechanism of control that allows you to control the entity. So it's the combination of the two words in a single sentence that may be the root of your concern. As we interpret this language, and I want everybody to actually pay attention to the lawyer for about 60 seconds, we're going to actually interpret this that if Spammer 1 is trying to convey the assets to Spammer 2 because Spammer 1 has court orders against them or is somehow in trouble, we're going to look very carefully at those kind of control activities. We're also going to someday be in a 2% case where we will tell a company that they haven't successfully proven ownership or control, despite what they may believe is adequate proof of ownership or control. It'll be a legal judgment based in part on the business ownership that we see in the records in the world and in the technology that's employed. So if that helps people understand, there is a substantial legal judgment that ARIN's actually quite skilled at and normally doesn't require the general counsel to do. The business people at ARIN know how to look at chains of corporation and evaluate this, but there will be times where it gets kicked out of that loop and it will be looked at a higher level. And ultimately, Mr. Curran represents an appeal mechanism if somebody believes that the staff and the lawyers have come up with an erroneous decision.
Vint, did that address your question, or did you?
No. It partly addresses it, but I'm going to suggest for consideration that this language be revised. And I know that's a big pain in the neck. But what is really intended, according to my understanding, is the following. Unless either the source or recipient entity owns or controls the other. Because this notion of owning and controlling each other literally does not make any sense. It's only something that would happen between consenting companies in California, as far as I can tell. So I would recommend clarity here is in our favor. And so I leave it at that for your consideration.
All right, and sir, Mr. Tassett is a lawyer, and he's been very helpful in this process. There was another formulation, Christopher, where you and I went over this exact issue.
Yeah.
And maybe we should just look back at what we had and see if it's in some way addresses Vince's concern.
Well, I think Chris wanted to address some concern first.
No, I mean, that's fine. We'll look at it and see if this isn't clear enough. You know, I think as that was a good suggestion for General Counsel and I to work together on this to see if this does make sense or needs some further clarification. But the overall intent, we just want to be clear, whether we use this or some slightly different nuanced language, the intent is to make it a fairly simple and straightforward legal test that is one with which, as General Counsel said, there is experience in application, and moreover, which is certainly known in law. People know in law what ownership and control mean, and certainly even inside counsel at ARIN would be well versed in that to assist in advising staff as necessary. So we're trying to keep it simple and have this as a backstop to the concern about bypassing the anti-flip in inappropriate ways.
John?
In looking at this very carefully, at the first clause and the language, own or control each other, that establishes a set of conditions that I understand exactly what you mean by this, and I think the policy makes sense with what you mean, but in the exact literal interpretation, you probably can't have two entities owning and controlling each other at the same time. And so there's some language parsing that needs to be fixed, but that doesn't change the intent. I think that's fine. That's what I said. Right. I'm just taking a long time to agree with you.
Okay, why don't we move to the front microphone for a moment?
Well, John Springer, ARIN-AC. My question had to do with the link in the agenda online, links to text dated the 11th of April. Is this text today, the 18th of April, identical to the 11th?
It should be, unless there's a typo somewhere.
Kevin Bloomberg, I believe, was.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire, and AC. So I'm seeing one use case given here. We have a lot of people from the community, I think, that I'd like to hear from in terms of the other uses for this policy. The first thing that comes to mind is, at least I've seen in the news, a number of organizations who over the last 12 months have set up situations in Germany and Ireland, etc., for keeping their data isolated from North America. And to me, this seems like a perfect example where an organization in North America who's just gotten a large block of space from the ARIN region might want to hive off some of that space and for legal reasons, feels that it is in their best interest to keep it in a different RIR. So that's one use case I sort of can, on the back of my paper, write down. And my question is, are there other use cases that the community sees? Is this, how targeted is this policy? Because to me it seems actually it's more broad than the way it's being described.
So Kevin, would you be in support, or do you think it's?
I'd like to hear more from the community. I think that I'm in support if it is a broader policy, but I'm concerned about how scalpel-focused this policy seems right now, but I don't believe that's actually the case.
Okay. We've got about 5 more minutes of discussion, so if you'd like to speak on this topic, I would encourage you to approach a microphone, and we will go with the front first.
Owen DeLong, Akamai, ARIN-AC, member of the community. Even the proposers of this policy have at this point stated that it's pretty much a corner case and fairly narrowly focused. I believe that to be the continuing case, though it would address the broader issue that Kevin has raised. I don't know that anybody is clamoring for that broader issue to be addressed as yet. I haven't heard such a thing until Kevin proposed it. I'm opposed to the policy at this current point. I believe Vince's issue can be easily addressed by changing each to the and moving on. A quick editorial change that doesn't change the intent of the policy, so that can be cleaned up before it goes to last call if we decide to move it forward. But I remain opposed to the policy because I think that the can of worms it opens in terms of bypassing the anti-flip provisions is much, much larger than the problem it is trying to solve.
Okay. Rear microphone.
Yes, Milton Wheeler, Georgia Institute of Technology, and an AC member. I was just going to propose a very simple language modification that would solve Vince's problem. So it should read, unless either the source or recipient entity is owned or controlled by the other, comma, or both are under common ownership or control. So that seems that it solves that problem. And in terms of the intent of the policy, I think I support it. I think it's dealing with, again, maybe a small number of cases, but it does solve a problem that might happen fairly frequently in the future. And I don't see the loophole problem because I don't see a big reason for somebody to go through all of this rigmarole to simply flip, you know, a /24 or something. So that's my view.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak or make a comment on this proposal? Andrew, do we have anyone? Andrew's doing Jabber, right? No, just making sure. We'll be closing the microphones in a few seconds if I don't see people making approach. Going once, twice, 3 times. Microphones are closed. Let's thank Chris for the presentation. Yeah, no, Dan, I do believe you'd like to still. Okay, so we're going to do a poll, and I'll speak slowly for a second as our counters get into position and give me the green light. The question that we are going to be asking is whether you believe the Advisory Council should continue to work on this proposal. Correct, Dan? That's what you'd like at this time? Yeah. So I will first ask for you to raise your hand if you are in support of it, and then I will ask for those to raise their hand that are against. Please keep your hand raised until I ask you to lower. It's a great little exercise after a lovely lunch, and we also just need a little bit of time for the remote participation. So looking for the thumbs up. Thumbs up. Those that are in favor of the Advisory Council continue to work on this, please raise your hand nice and high. One hand only, please. Please keep it up. Just be a few more seconds here. And those, of course, online, please follow the instructions to show your support or not. Okay, you may lower your hands now. And now I would ask those that are opposed to the Advisory Council continuing to work on this proposal to raise your hand nice and high. Thank you. So just one, you may lower and just give us 1 second to do the tabulations. Go ahead, John.
As a reminder, everyone is entitled to participate in the policy process, including the show of support. So you are, if you're sitting there wondering, did I need a special card or stamp? Does my badge need to say something? No, you're entitled to participate. A number of us curtail our participation. That should not surprise you. You won't see me raising or lowering my hand. Some of the other RIR staff tend not to. The Advisory Council and Board, it's at their discretion. Certainly we have people who go both ways. ARIN staff generally refrain as well. So, but you are free to participate. No special accreditations required. It is open to everyone.
No special test. Oh, thank you very much. And the envelope. On the matter of 2015-2, modify 8.4, we had 105 in the room, 3 remote, so that's a total of 108. 29 are in favor, 1 against. This feedback is being provided to the Advisory Council for their consideration. Thank you. Turn over to John.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much, Chris and Paul.